Very good morning, everyone. You're tuning into Born Social's second digital event of isolation. I'm Charlotte Hamill, COO of Born Social. Hello again to all those who joined us last time, and welcome to anyone joining us for the first time. Before we get started, please do take the opportunity throughout the event to make use of the Q&A function. You should be able to see at the bottom of your screens. We can't promise we'll get to them all individually, but we'll address any themes that we see at the end. So we'll also follow up with a recording of the session and also with links to the slides, because I have no doubt you'll be dying to share them with people. So when it comes to these events, we have been listening to what marketeers, both brand side and agency side alike, are talking about and asking each other. A couple of weeks ago at our first event, everyone wanted to know how brands were initially responding to the COVID crisis on social, so that's what we discussed. Now attention seems to have turned towards how brands are adjusting to social distancing as a longer term reality and addressing the need to maintain brand awareness but in an appropriate way. So the question we're hearing now more is, how do we actually continue to make when we can't meet? So this morning we thought we'd examine content production in isolation. Now, obviously, as a social media agency, this is a challenge Born Social has needed to tackle head on. But we're also an agency that define ourselves by our ability to think like David, not Goliath. And that means we see opportunity in challenge and really enjoy and relish changing the status quo. So in light of this, we do feel pretty confident that we're some of the best people to be talking about this topic today. And to delve into it, we have Ilana Green, one of our fantastic strategists, who is going to highlight the cultural shifts and behaviour changes that are informing some of the content that we are seeing. And then the lovely Paddy Smith, our creative director, will take us through some of the specific content examples on a more executional level, and offer some top takeaways for implementing them in your content. So if we look at the three key themes we'll be looking at, we've got creators and communities. So this is looking at, we're going to explore how you can use real people to remotely create for you. Then we have pop-up studios, where we'll take a look at where content is being made if it's not on location or in a studio. And finally, Rethink and Rework, and this is how to use the content that you've already got. So that's more than enough from me, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what to expect over the next 40 minutes or so. Now I'll hand you over to Ilana, but please enjoy. Ilana, over to you.
Thanks. So the first area we're going to talk about this morning is creators and communities. These are the people that brands are working with to produce content at the moment. And we've seen that influencer content has really taken the lead over the past few weeks. More brands than ever are looking to collaborate with influencers. And that's no surprise when budgets are really tight at the moment, because if you're working with influencers, you get production, creation, and distribution all in the same package. And there's been a 40% increase in the performance of social ads created with content by influencers. But influencer partnerships aren't exactly new. Brands have been working with influencers for quite a while to build social proof and working with ambassadors to add a human element to brands where they can't do that on their own. So what's different about it this time? Research by Edelman suggested that brands are expected to help people connect in isolation. Over 80% of people said that they expected brands to help them stay emotionally close and use social media to facilitate a sense of community and offer social support to people. Julie Saltzinger, a professor of advertising and branding entertainment, said that brands are putting out messages right now to bring people together, and people will become a little bit more loyal to brands that make them believe it's all going to be okay. So even when we're physically separated, it's all about building that sense of community. And we can see it all around us. People are longing to get involved in something bigger, making rainbows for the NHS, putting it in their windows, sharing it on social media to really show that community spirit. And with the amount that people are doing and sharing, reaching far and wide online, is everyone an influencer now? Captain Tom Moore raised millions of pounds, hit #1 in the charts, something that I haven't been aware of for ages, but we all knew about it when he did it. And he went absolutely viral. And that's exposure that most influencers and brands really aspire to. Our advice Influencers, ambassadors, and audiences have the ability to create when brands can't, whether that's drawing, designing, acting, or filming themselves. And to facilitate a sense of community, brands often need a human element to resonate, something they can't get on their own. So make the most of partnerships. Encourage people to create, share, and feel connected with others.
So the first part of communities we're looking at is all about encouraging audiences. So how can you unite your fans to access them as a resource for production remotely and at scale, but also thinking about how they can take your idea and your execution further than you ever could on your own. I think if you need any evidence of this, just look to the recent Getty Museum competition, where they asked their audience to recreate their favourite artwork at home and then share on social. And what came back was creativity in abundance. It's probably my favourite thing that I've seen on social since lockdowns happened. My personal favourite is bottom middle. It kind of cracks me up every single time I look at it. But this is a brilliant example of kind of how ready and capable your audience are when given the right brief and the right prompt. And we've seen a lot of brands interpret this quite quickly. I think quite a nice simple example comes from MeUndies, who are an underwear brand, who often look to quite stylized studio shots to do a lot of their product promotion. But since not being able to access this, they've flipped entirely to kind of a UGC-led strategy. Essentially, they're people in their pants in their homes. And this isn't anything new. It's not new for us or our brands, but or for them. But they say they've seen roughly a 70% increase in uptake. I think mainly because they've taken it quite seriously now. They've created a value exchange where they trade pants for posts. And I think this has given them a whole new content stream, one that can replace their production they were previously reliant on. But more so, I think really does humanise the brand really well, better than those shoots ever did before, in the context of their audience that has changed quite significantly. I think we've experienced this firsthand with a lot of our brands, one of them being Chili's bottles, the reusable water bottles, which I'm sure you see dotted around London, hopefully around your offices too. A big part of our creative strategy for them is shoots on location with talent to kind of contextualise the product in different scenarios or lifestyles. So without access to this, we've had to really lean the opportunity to interact with a new community, to talk to the creative community. So we actually launched a campaign called Creatives Everywhere, and this is a blank canvas that we've given to our audience to flex creatively. Apologies for a bit of a technical delay on this. So we offered our audience a blank canvas to flex creatively, to show us what they can make, but also to potentially be part of a limited run with donations to charity as well. So to be part of something bigger. And again, what has come back is creativity in abundance. I love looking through these. I think my personal favorite is either the finger up the nose, or the green bottle I really like, or the 11-year-old who did the promotion for the NHS, which kind of got everyone right in the feels at the office. And so this has unlocked a whole new stream of content for us, and one we can now use to supplement what we would have done with shoots, but also I think has a good example of taking this beyond what we probably would have been able to access if this kind of hadn't been thrust upon us. So the second part of communities is all about engaging employees. So you have a group of people you already work with who know your brand. Think about how you can use them to unlock production remotely and at scale. And again, a brand who's done this quite well since lockdown's begun is ASOS, another example of a brand that has quite a distinct art direction and is often led by studio shoots. Again, without access to this, they've kind of flipped their strategy to be focused around their employees with their At Home with ASOS content series. So this is a series that looks at the interests and opinions of the people behind the business, whether that be at-home style guides, even garden workouts and tie-dyeing your unwanted clothes. So this gives them a whole new stream of content. But one thing, again, I think humanizes the brand really well. And the challenge here is always going to be feeling comfortable relinquishing creative control, especially for a brand that's had such a clear art direction for months or even years. But it's knowing that really overly aspirational and fine-tuned content does feel a bit tone deaf right now. So it's a real opportunity to lean into more rough and ready, but people-led content. And a slightly left field example comes from Thinks. I think Thinks, they make period-proof underwear. And like a lot of brands, probably a lot of people on this call, they've been thinking about what does TikTok look like for them, the weird and wonderful world of TikTok. But rather than just strategizing, theorizing about what it could look like, what I like about things is they've just got stuck in with their employees. This is Lee_NYC. As her bio suggests, she works for Thinks and talks about periods. And this is her having a go at promoting periods on TikTok using the meme, song, challenge style format that we know works really well. And she is doing really well. This has got 100,000 views. And I'm sure this slide more than any terrifies everyone on this. And I'm not suggesting that you are now responsible for leading your TikTok strategy, but I think it is a really good example of just getting stuck in, testing and learning about what does and doesn't work before you roll it out at a larger scale. And the third part of communities is all about unlocking ambassadors. So this is looking at the partnerships, the relationships, the agreements that you already have, and again, how they could unlock production for you remotely and at scale. Zara is also someone who's done this well since lockdowns occurred. Again, another brand that is quite reliant on studio shoots to do product launches for them, but without access to this, another launch coming up, they've actually turned to the partnerships with models to see how they could reshoot this, and sent them the products to shoot in their own home, in their own lives, kind of in their own style. And I think this has come out with a really interesting outcome. So without access to studio, they haven't halted. Instead, they've carried on and created something new. I think this perfectly taps into that heightened desire for more accessible content, and actually has produced something really interesting and different to that kind of chic and very stylized approach they've had to date. And potentially the best example of this comes from Nike with their Living Room Cup campaign, which is kind of an execution of their broader play inside messaging that released quite early on into lockdown. So they've used their sponsored athletes to set micro physical challenges to encourage their audience to participate and generate UGC. Then they collate that UGC to recreate new assets to kind of keep the cycle of participation going. And this is a brilliant example. It's also undeniably Nike as well. It's really on brand. And I think this works best because it kind of plays on that borrowed interest that we all have. We are all doing at-home workouts and confined to doing them in our front room. And for this very strange moment in time, you can actually challenge Cristiano Ronaldo in a physical competition, even if it is just sit-ups. And that's why it works, and that's why it's created such participation and production at scale. And the other part of this is about looking at working with creators. This is all about unlocking influencers, which I'm sure you've all worked with in some regard, but the big difference here is rather than looking at influencers simply as someone who offers you reach as a new audience and judging them by the size of their audience, really focusing on what their ability is to create interesting platform-specific content that you might not be able to do. And a good example of this comes from Hotspot Shield, which is a kind of VPN app that allows you to access entertainment from all around the world. And they went to TikTok to partner with the creator Bobby Moore to make a promotion of this, which I'm going to play for you now. Quick warning to headphone users, it is quite loud, so now's your time to adjust accordingly.
How to not get bored during lockdown. So you spent the last 3 weeks in your house and you've watched everything there is on Netflix. Now what do? Well, what if I told you there were hundreds of TV shows and movies that you haven't seen because they're only available in America? You'd be annoyed, right? Well, what if I then told you the secret way to find them? You'd be unbelievably happy, wouldn't you? So watch and listen carefully. The first step is to click the link in my bio and download Hotspot Shield VPN. After it's downloaded, set your virtual location as the United States. Now simply load up the Netflix app and it will be the US version. I hope this helps to keep you entertained during lockdown. Thank me later.
So I think this is a really good example of partnering with creators because it clearly hijacks that how-to trend that we know works well on platforms like TikTok to make a how-to not get bored during lockdown. So actually to contextualize a product in the reality of their audience lives, which makes it even more relevant. So it's amassed around 3.2 million views, I think it is now, and they've attributed around 50,000 downloads to it. So by all means, super successful. But I think it's a really good example of being led by a creator. So finding the people who know the platforms, the formats, and their audience really well, and letting them dictate what the content should look like. So a few key takeaways from this section. The first one being build for interaction, don't just adjust. So don't just add a call to action to an existing asset that you already have. If you want people to create for you and to produce at scale, you really need to build that in from the word go. Secondly is take it seriously and offer value. I think if you want this to replace a production process you would have been doing, you need to apply the same seriousness and create value, whether that be monetary, product exchange or promotion. You should be taking it seriously as you would any other content pillar. And thirdly, try creator first and trust their creativity. If you're struggling to figure out what this looked like, try and find those people who are doing it really well on their platforms, who really understand the formats and their audiences, and reach out to them and help them carve out the brief with you.
So our second area of the morning is pop-up studios. With sets, location, lighting, all out of reach, how should we think about creating content with makeshift alternatives? It's interesting to see how people are reacting to traditional content. When they're watching TV and seeing people touch or in crowds, it feels slightly strange, even if we know that it was filmed pre-social distancing. Content that was previously really aspirational, now it feels slightly uncomfortable. And actually, there's much more joy seeing a world that's a little bit more attainable, with everyone living in the same situation. And we can see that in the best celebrity content where it reflects reality. You've got talk show hosts with logos designed by their kids, and Martin Clunes was interviewed in his pajamas at home. Stanley Tucci was trending on Twitter not long after he made a Negroni, although slightly incorrectly, on Instagram TV. And Stacey Solomon's just really showing the realities of living at home with young kids on her ever-growing TikTok channel. But it's not just how we're living that's changed, it's the online environments we're spending time in. I'm not the first person to say that a few weeks ago Zoom had a completely different meaning, and now we can't really live without it. But it's chaotic. The Wi-Fi drops out, people walk in on meetings they're not supposed to be in, no one really knows when to speak because we don't want to interrupt each other. But people are forgiving, knowing that we're all dealing with the same problems. Life isn't perfect at the moment. Let's not pretend that it is. Visual flaws are accepted when it reflects reality. It's actually more important that sound is clear, to hear what's being said rather than seeing everything in crystal clear HD. So make the most of the world that we're living in, where it's acceptable to wear pillows as a fashion trend. Let's embrace the new imperfection.
So the first part we've looked at here is all about shooting on mobile, and this really is about substance over style, focusing on what the value of the content is as opposed to just what it looks like. And the good news is we know that people aren't expecting perfection, so now is the perfect time to kind of experiment and play with this, and mobile really does offer you accessibility and scale to achieve this really quickly. I think a really good example of this comes from Greggs, who've done mobile first shooting for their recent DIY at home Greggs series, which they're called GIY, Greggs It Yourself. This one we see them making a sausage, bean and cheese melt at home. And I think it works just because it is super simple, it's super honest and down to earth, just like the product and the brand and kind of everything they've done today. And really, a foolproof recipe does need foolproof production, and the fact that it's shot on the other hand in mobile whilst egg basting this pastry kind of exaggerates the ease of the entire thing. And I think it would be frankly quite weird to have a high production finish on a cheese and bean melt. This really is just about knowing how to make it and not what it looks like. I think another good example of this comes from Tesco's, from their food love stories, but more recently how they've iterated on this to be able to continue to produce it at scale. I contemplated putting this in the community section because it is fundamentally driven by community, about real people and peer-to-peer recommendations. But I think it's a really good example of going to mobile first, because previous shoots have always been quite considered, stylized, really high standard, as you can see here. But since lockdown, they've actually moved entirely to being shot on mobile. So shot on iPhone, internal camera, pixelated, poorly cropped, but they've maintained the exact same emotion. And I think they're probably actually more heartwarming and relevant than ever. It's a really good example of while the literal quality might seem like it's gone down, the actual quality of the content itself has kept to a really, really high standard. The second section here we've called on Mac. Other laptop brands are available, so I've been told. And this for us is all about using the phrase the new normal, to steal that phrase. But I do think that communicating on laptops is a bit of the new normal. That grid layout, a Zoom Hangout is the new meeting, it is the new pub quiz down hanging with your friends. So it does reflect what actual communication and time together does look like. But also laptops offer you essentially a miniature pop-up studio that allows you to shoot and share and test really quickly. And we've kind of seen this style been interpreted by a lot of brands, even all the way up to TV very quickly. This was how Co-op interpreted it for their Local Heroes campaign, which was out within a week of lockdown, kind of hijacking this visual cue from kind of Zoom-esque Skype, because they know this is how people are actually communicating. And again, we've seen this quite a few times on social too. I think sandwich company Potbelly did this quite well in execution, where they portrayed what the new lunch break looks like, with all their colleagues hanging out and sharing a lunch over Zoom, and then adding a bit of creative flair to feature the product by literally passing it between the panels, which I think is quite a nice, simple concept that taps into new reality, features the brand and product well, but also allows them to all just shoot in their own homes and test that idea really quickly, which is why I think it's good. The final part is about Makeshift. So this is all about making it work. When you need to continue to deliver to a high standard or a high quantity, it's about being resourceful to keep this on track. And it'd be pretty difficult to feature this section without doing a bit of a plug of the variety of Makeshift pop-up studios that we have kind of popped up in creative houses all across London, taking up all of their personal space. But one of our core business values is getting more from less. I think you'd really be surprised at what you can still achieve from really simple setups and solutions. Just because you don't have everything that you did before doesn't mean the standard has to slip. And you can still unlock really great work, really high quality assets from home. This is shot by Rachel, our senior creative, still showing that you can unlock really high quality assets, even in simple setups. I think beyond this as well, pop-up studios really do offer you an opportunity to be flexible and experimental, moving into new places, experimenting with new light sources to get new and interesting outcomes that you might not have even achieved in your usual setup. I'm absolutely obsessed with bottom left. I really love that sneaky shadow in there. I think that's brilliant. And Crocs have also shown us kind of how to take this approach and apply it to a sort of smaller micro video series. So welcome to, this is Crocs' absurd look at their weird and wonderful work from home experience. And this is done with a very simple setup. It could be phone on a tripod, simple lighting, and kind of a crude green screen that allows them to apply colour to kind of unite and brand this as one series. I think this does work really well for them. It's really fun, it's really playful, but ultimately this sort of setup does require leaning into the rough and ready and being comfortable with that. So it's going to work best for executions that are slightly humorous, a bit self-deprecating and tongue-in-cheek, which works well for Crocs. But it's good evidence that you can still kind of shoot these sort of things even on very stripped back setups. And I also think it's worth just looking to creators, those who used to roam free, have the world as their oyster, but are now very much confined to their homes. I think this is a really good example from filmmaker Philip Klein, who kind of turned those constraints into sheer creativity with this stop motion skiing at home film that he made for GoPro. So it's brilliant. I've seen it shared lots on social, lots by people who don't even work in marketing, which is probably quite a good sign. And it really is about finding those creators who are turning those constraints into creativity and still delivering really interesting stuff, even while at home. So key takeaways for us here. First, embrace the rough and ready. Know that people are seeking a bit of imperfection and reality. So now is actually the perfect time to experiment with that lo-fi alternative you might have been considering. Secondly, only make things people actually want to see. If you're thinking and hoping that the idea might come to life on craft alone, now probably isn't the best time to execute that. You might want to rework it or potentially park it for when you can access high craft solutions. Part 3, make and move on. I don't want to use the phrase be brave. I'm not a massive fan of it, but I do think it is just about being open to testing, learning and failing and trying alternate solutions.
So our final area for the morning, rethink, rework, making the most of the skills and the content that you have at your disposal. We've seen a huge increase in content, and I saw this tweet the other day that said Netflix must have known about coronavirus because they're releasing new seasons of everything in our time of quarantine. There have been TV shows and films thrown at us left, right and centre. And with that, TV viewing has been soaring as lockdown hit, and Disney Plus hit 5 million app downloads, much faster than any other streaming network. Social media habits have been following exactly the same trend. Consumption is increasing and there's a huge appetite for even more. But with social restrictions set to remain in some way or another for the rest of the year, online behaviours are set to remain high. With no clear end in sight, as brands and agencies, we need to keep creating, supporting and entertaining. But how else can we keep up with the content demand whilst having these limited resources? First of all, use and explore technology. Think about what can be done with a computer, whether it's illustration, graphic design, 3D rendering. Think beyond the norm and what these tools are really capable of. But second, use what you've got. Brands have acquired so much content over time from all of their previous campaigns, and all of that content has already been signed off. A lot of brands are a little bit scared of reusing old content, but people don't mind if it's saying something new. Why not upcycle what you've got? One of our agency values is getting more from less, and I think that's extremely relevant here, knowing how much time and money was invested in creating that old content. So could you give it a new lease of life and let it take on a new meaning? So use the restraints and the constraints of the environment that we're currently living in to really push creative boundaries. Think outside the box and think in really different ways. Make the most of this really unique creative moment and allow it to change the way that we approach both ideation and production, not just now, but in the future.
So the first part we look at is reworking, and we think of this as creative upcycling. It's really about making the most of what you've got, looking back to the resources you've acquired from previous campaigns or shoots, or even the resources that are available to everyone through royalty-free websites, and considering how you can rework that into something new and something ownable. And Coldplay, of all people, have actually set the bar really high here. They did this in their video for the song Up and Up. So this is made entirely out of pre-existing footage that they've then kind of smashed and spliced together to create this new world, one that is like really unique visually and actually then can become really ownable. I think we've seen a lot of brands jump to this quite quickly in lockdown, one of them being Skyscanner, who kind of created this ode to travel. Obviously, travel is massively disrupted, and for all the people who are still wanting to visit new places, connect with new people, see new communities, they've sort of rallied the troops to feel motivated about how this will come back and we will be able to travel again. And this is entirely made again out of found footage, a very simple narrative, very simple edit style, which means they could make this really quickly and release it while relevance was still really high. But I think the big challenge we're seeing here is how we make this ownable when everyone has access to very similar footage and very similar messaging. I think now we've seen quite a lot, frankly, of kind of cliched responses that all talk about the same thing in the same sort of way. So I think if you want to do this, you really do have to focus on making it ownable and making it memorable in order to stand out. And this is something we've experienced when working with Tinder UK, specifically on an asset that we did with them a couple of months ago, talking about what single means to us, reinventing what single looks like. So rather than focusing our attention on shooting everything new, we went back to the archives. We looked at everything that existed from previous shoots, stills, influencer work, royalty-free websites, and then focus our attention on writing a narrative that we thought did the topic justice, adding a voiceover that added grit and personality, and then bringing in an edit style and distinctive brand cues that meant it was fundamentally ownable and Tinder and recognizable. And by doing this, it meant we could move much faster for much less money. I do think it's the attitude you need to have to execute this, but really do focus on making it ownable so it doesn't just look like the brochure that is everyone else's responses. The second part of this is rethinking. Here it's all about challenging your assumptions, considering, is this actually video that I need to make in order to bring this idea to life? Could it be brought to life in different creative ways? I think potentially my favorite example when looking through all of these actually comes from Tata Pravesh, which is a brand of steel doors from Tata Steel. I never thought I'd put a door company in a creative presentation, but I think it's a brilliant example. It's their kind of stay inside promo they've called Stay Safe Behind the Doors of India, which I'll just play for you now. So hopefully you could hear that. If not, it's well worth a watch afterwards. I think why I think this is really good is that rather than leading and defaulting with visuals or video, they've actually led with sound, creating this kind of homemade soundscape, which is a remake of kind of Indian classical rhythm music made entirely out of the slamming, sliding and shutting of doors. And then they've reworked back to create visuals to accompany that, actually sourcing all of these from Instagram, from the hashtag Doors of India. And that's what I like about it, going sound first and visual second, kind of redefine what their priority was. Similarly, I think this is a really good time to consider how your brand, your product, your message can be brought to life with animation. Nike have been doing this for years and set the bar really high, building these beautiful 3D renders to kind of promote most of their products, but specifically their Air Max collections. What I love here, they've just created this totally alternate and abstract world to show what the product looks like, but also what it kind of feels like, and actually goes way beyond that of what video or photo could achieve on its own. So a good example of challenging, could this be video, or could it actually go further with animation and 3D renders? And also think someone who's done this well and quite quickly since lockdown is Taco Bell UK. Again, the majority of their output was focused around photography, food photography, which they can't really access now, but also shots of people sharing that together, which right now does feel a little bit tone deaf or potentially inappropriate. So they've quickly flipped this into being led entirely by illustration. So partnering with illustrators to kind of create these new worlds that symbolize what it feels like to eat Taco Bell food, that are just focusing on being bright, bold, and colorful, and therefore really stand out. I think it's a good example of seeing the opportunity to do something in a totally different way. So our core takeaways from here are, firstly, don't be afraid of upcycling creative. It's better to remake and rehash something to miss an opportunity to speak in a relevant way. Secondly, the focus then has to go on making it ownable. How can you make it yours? Can you focus on narrative, on sound, on branded cues that make it memorable, compelling, and creative? And thirdly, challenge whether it is live video that you actually think you need. Could this idea come to life using animation, illustration, or even being led by sound? So those are the three broad ways in which we think you can continue to produce during isolation. Just to pull those together to summarize slightly, we think you have these three routes to explore. Firstly, is using creators and communities. And this is all about looking at how you can understand and tap into your audiences, your employees, your ambassadors, or creators to offer you remote production at scale. Secondly is pop-up studios, really looking at how you could shoot on mobile, even on Mac, or what makeshift solutions you have to continue to produce consistently. And then finally, it's about rethinking and reworking. How can you upcycle what already exists, both from stuff you've made previously, but also what's available and royalty-free, but always focusing on making it ownable. And then also rethinking what are the alternatives you might have here outside of video, whether it be animation, illustration, or even led with sound. So we hope these give you some things to consider, some options that can help you bridge the gap in your production during isolation. I think more so, we know that normality isn't going to be back anytime soon. So more broadly, we hope this provides you an opportunity to really consider what your general approach to production or social media production is as well. I think for us at Born, this time has given us another big reminder of what social is and why it's so great. It's reminded us that it is all about connection, emotion, authenticity, and about people. And when people make content, they very rarely tend to have big production budgets. Instead, they always go lo-fi first, but they focus on making it interesting, entertaining, emotional, memorable. And again, that is our big takeaway from this. It's really not the style of your content that's going to win, it's always the substance. Thanks.
Great, thanks guys, that was brilliant. Got some questions for you. Paddy, first one, I'll fire over, that's all right. Talked quite a bit about rough content. Do you have any advice for judging the quality of rough and ready? How rough is too rough?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think too rough is if it doesn't work. Again, I think you have to come back to really focusing on judging it on what that content is trying to do and whether that works. So is it trying to be inspiring? Is it inspiring? Is it trying to be entertaining? Is it entertaining? And really focusing on judging on that set of criteria first. And then if you are still quite worried about how it does look, I think you have a few more options as well. You can try experimenting with putting it in places where it's not so much about finish. So think about maybe, for example, in stories, way more ephemeral, rough and ready throwaway content. So you can start putting it in there if you are worried about that. Or bringing in branded elements. I think ASOS did this well with the at-home graphic that overlaid everything to kind of unite it and make it a bit more ownable. So I think you can do those two things as well if you are worried, but you really should be focusing on kind of, does that content work? Can I understand it? Does the audio work? Is it making me feel the thing I'm supposed to feel? And then kind of put what it looks like to the back of your mind for the time being.
Great, thanks, Pads. And Ilana, one for you. Do we see brands maintaining this style of content beyond, it's cost-efficient aging?
I think it'll be interesting to see how content does change when we go back to kind of phasing into normality. And there are some elements that definitely should be taken into the future. The way of thinking with these constraints allows us to experiment a bit more and not go back to our habits that we've been used to. But there are things like live video that might change, because at the moment a lot of brands are taking advantage of the fact that everybody is sitting at home with loads of time to spare. Once we're able to go out and about, then behaviours might change, and it's definitely stuff to watch and keep an eye on as we shift our approach.
Yeah, great point. A nice punchy question here. So stuff in. Does this mean agency rates should get cheaper?
My answer is no. No, I don't think so. I think it's just a good example. All of these require a really good understanding of social, of your audience, of what works. It still requires, I think, a lot of expertise to be able to tap into doing things like working with your community better. So it's definitely still requires kind of a lot of understanding to do even what looks like the simplest thing really, really well. So I still think it's important to have experts, funny enough.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, I guess, the efforts and time that our creatives have had to put in of having to rework ways of doing things, couriering equipment left, right and centre. But very good question, great question. And another good question from Sarah. Do we see high quality content production remaining, or how long will it feel uncomfortable to see high quality? So at what point will that high quality polished look start feeling comfortable again post-lockdown?
So they say that it takes 21 days for people to adopt a habit, which is why we all got used to the whole working from home, seeing things a little bit more rough and ready quite quickly. That also means that when we go back into interacting with people and living our lives as we were before, it will take a little bit of time to know how to kind of interact with others and see people in the way that we were used to. But I don't think it will take as long as we expect. People snap back into old habits quite quickly. So it's all about having that fine balance of knowing how people are reacting and really watching the comments and the engagement with your content to see, are people comfortable? Do they like it? Or is it still too soon?
Yeah,
just building on that, I think this isn't necessarily saying that all high quality content is now wrong or inappropriate. For a lot of brands, it is still the right thing to do and does reflect their brand in the best way. I think it's more so seeing it as the flip side, as actually this is an opportunity to play around in lo-fi and to play around in things that really interact with your audience in a different way. So you can still produce, I think, high quality content and it be relevant, but actually you can see it as an opportunity to do something slightly different and not just default to that.
Nice. And Paddy, you talked a bit about, I guess, really focusing on creating stuff that your audience really want. Obviously, we're always trying to create stuff that audiences want, but do you have any, I guess, guidance on how we can really make it accurate at this kind of moment in time?
Yeah, I think, we always do a lot of social listening to understand what our audience actually talk about and therefore try and help that curate what we say and how we say it. But I actually think I've seen some really good examples of brands quite literally asking their audience if they're unsure. So either doing small tests, so sort of implicitly finding out what works, or asking people what they would like to see, what tips, what insights, what behind the scenes. I think Pret have done that really well when asking people what recipes they would like to see. So actually just putting it on them to dictate what the content strategy is, and therefore knowing that you've got a tee up that's already happening. People are excited to see that, but then when you make it, it is actually really relevant.
Yeah, and at the moment, it's actually quite unique where you've got brands, agencies and audiences all living the exact same life or in the same environments. And that's something that we never really have because everyone looks at the way we're living in a completely different way. So how I'm experiencing things and what I want to see is very similar to my kind of clients, my brands, but also the audiences that we're speaking to. So it's something to kind of take advantage of, that we know how a lot of people are thinking and feeling because we're all feeling the same thing.
Yeah, a question from Nancy's just come in, which is, I think, spot on. Definitely something that we have felt at Born. What are your thoughts on planning ahead with things being so unpredictable? Are we best to be thinking very short term?
Go ahead, Ilana, sorry.
There's no reason to not plan long term, but I think the thing to be really aware of is just be flexible, be agile with what you're thinking about, what you're suggesting, because it could be that we plan for a few months' time and everything's back to normal, or behaviours have changed in a way that we never expected. So think kind of broad and big, what's always going to be brand relevant, and tap into brand values that don't go away, but be flexible with how it's going to be executed depending on how the world is living.
Yeah, great advice there. And finally, you know, we talked about potentially exploring newer mediums of creative, so animation, illustration, perhaps if you've not done it before. If you are a brand manager or a marketing manager and you haven't managed that type of content before, what advice would you give to them with working with new creatives and a new type of briefs?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with saying that as well, and being open with the fact that this is entirely new. I think one thing that's come out of this from all creative processes is over communication and transparency. So I think you can ask kind of to make kind of a minimum viable product, to test that, to see what it would look like, to make kind of scrappy versions, to get an idea of whether that is right or not, because sometimes it won't be. Those solutions might not work and it might be video. You may have to postpone that. So I think it's about first being totally open and honest with the fact that this could be something new, and then trying to build the smallest version of that to test whether it is right or not, to quickly, before you commit to, you know, long processes, which we know animation can take a long time, even just to export and work the files. So I think it is about working up the smallest version to test whether that is right.
A theme we're seeing in some of the questions is how to, I guess, approach not offending anyone in content. Lots of brands seem to be a bit worried about putting content out that is insensitive. Are there any creative guidelines that you guys have been working to kind of navigate that sensitivity?
I think I wouldn't say we've had explicit guidelines. I think there is a note to be said about you don't always have to say something. I feel like a lot of brands have very quickly responded and been quite explicit in the way they've talked about it. Not everyone has to do that, and actually, you know, saying less could be more valuable. I always think it is worth bearing in mind, does this look like in any way we are profiting from the pandemic? If it is, that is your biggest sense check, I think, internally. And then just asking people, and asking normal people as well, potentially people who don't work in marketing, to give you a bit more of an honest feedback, whether they think that's insensitive, is always going to be really helpful.
Yeah, and something that we discussed in our last event as well is it's never too late to put content out there. So if it takes you a little bit longer to get to that right message and to hit that line of being kind of responsible with what you're saying, that's okay. Don't worry that we don't know what's going on, so we're not going to post and share anything at all. If it does take a little bit of time, that's fine. And if you do have the right message, again, it's better to say what you want to say than miss the moment completely.
Nice. The world and its dog seems to be turning to live content. What are your thoughts on it? Are we over it?
It's a good question. We didn't put it in here. I don't necessarily see it as a alternate solution to production. I think it actually is quite difficult to do consistently and to do really well. I think it is still relevant, and I've seen some really good examples. I think the main thing that you need to bear in mind is that you almost have short form content, long form content, but not just to treat it as super long form content, to do something that is just longer than a minute or IGTV. actually to think about, is this creating interest for someone to stick around and watch? Is it building up to something, creating suspense where you just can't look away and you can't even buffer forward, so you have to stay with it? Or is it playing on interaction really well, where the audience actually have an opportunity to interact and dictate what's going to happen or talk to someone they want to talk to? I think if you can do those two things well, then live is definitely worth doing and exploring and looking at seriously as a part of production.
Yeah, and live content is also that way of reaching kind of a wider audience where what you're sharing, what you're doing was potentially seen as unattainable. I think it's really interesting to see like the National Theatre, the Metropolitan Opera, all posting out live or sharing versions of their content and their productions that are potentially seen as a little bit expensive. There are limited tickets. You can't always go to London and see something at the West End. So that's a way of kind of slowly reaching people that hadn't considered that kind of art before, and now they can appreciate it in their own time, in their own homes, and potentially come to it later when they can.
Great. And I think final question: has the metrics that we are looking at to measure the success and effectiveness of our content changed in this period?
Absolutely, because beforehand a lot of content was very sales led. Now it's more about engagement and brand affinity, being supportive. I think you have to look at what's going on in slightly looser terms, because stuff is all over the place, everything is up in the air, but really focusing on, are you saying the right message? Are people resonating with you, and are people loyal to your brand, rather than buying it right now, because that brand loyalty will kind of pay off in the long term.
Fantastic, thanks Ilana. Right, I think we're going to leave it there. A big thank you to Paddy and Ilana, and thank you again to everyone for joining us. As I said at the top of the show, to follow up, you can expect a recording of the session and links to our slides so you can share them. If you would like to follow up with us, you can email us at shout@bornsocial.co.uk. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.